bushfires have declined dramatically in Australia over the last 120 years. We know that because we have good statistics from about 1900. Back then, about 11% of Australia's area burnt each year. Today, we know that with satellites, it's about 5% that burns. All of that period, it's declined from 11% down to about 5.3% today. If you look at the current season, if you use the numbers that Guardian has produced, which actually indicates that almost 20 million hectares has burnt across Australia, and if you assume that some of it is not, so you also assume that there's extra that has been burnt as prescribed burning, and then of course also recognize that the whole fire season is not over. If you say, all right, what is the ratio of the current fire season to the whole fire season in the satellite history, then you get that the full fire season will probably have burnt a little less than 4%. So in the very, very low end of what you normally see. Now, this is not to say that the fires were not exceptional in any regard in Victoria and New South Wales. And that obviously matters because that's where a lot of people live. Now, it's also where a lot of cameras live, and that's where why you have this, that it's, it's great TV by any standards, but it's not great to inform you, because what we know is that the climate models tell us as climate change gets worse, we will see more bushfires. But the important part is they tell us we'll see more bushfires in all areas of vegetation except for tropical savanna. So maybe you should take out Northern Territory, and even if you do, you get the same result as what I just told you here. So what we're basically seeing is we're having people say, oh, in Victoria and New South Wales, much more bushfire, global warming. But they're ignoring the fact that we actually saw less bushfire in all the other areas, although if this was really global warming, it should have been more. Now, that's one part of the conversation. But the other part, and I think the more interesting one, is to say, so what can you do about it? And there, as you also rightly pointed out, there seems to be this misconception that if we just put up a solar panel, it'll stop burn. And that, when you just say it, you can sort of hear that, yeah, that doesn't sound right. But actually, we also can run it in the models. So if you look at the models for Australia, we estimate, as I said, 5.3% is burning right now. By the end of the century, because of global warming, if we don't do anything, we'll probably have about 6% burnt every year. That's 0.7 percentage points more every year. That's definitely a problem. That's something we should talk about. How do we avoid that? But if Australia went totally carbon neutral for the rest of the century, remember, this would have an enormous cost, and we can talk about the cost in just a second. It's almost unfathomable that it would be possible. But let's just assume that Australia stopped, as the first nation in the world, stopped entirely emitting carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases, and did so for the rest of the centuries, 2021, 2022, and there's a lot of years all the way up to 2100. If you manage that amazing feat, instead of seeing 6% burn by the end of the century, you would see 5.997% burn. So as you rightly pointed out, even in 80 years' time, you would not be able to tell the difference from this fantastically costly policy. So there's something fundamentally wrong about the way that we say, all right, here's a problem, let's fix it by cutting carbon emissions. If we, when we look at the models, actually realize the only thing the models tell us is if you cut a lot at really, really high cost, you'll have almost no impact in 100 years. That is a very bad way to help people. Now, there's a lot of smart ways to help people, and a lot of people have been talking about this: prescribed burns, better building codes, that you have fire tunnels, that you have much more surveillance, that there's a lot of other ways that you can actually do this and can do so smartly. And this is true in a lot of different circumstances. Now, again, this does not mean we should do nothing about global warming, because remember, the only benefit from doing global warming policies is not just that it burns less in Australia. There's a lot of other benefits, and we should include all of those, and I'm sure we'll talk about that in just a second. But when it comes down to saying, my God, look at these burns, let's cut a ton of CO2, it's just simply a non sequitur. It's actually almost immoral, I would say, to say we're going to do the costliest but least effective thing to help the future victims of bushfires the least. Somehow that doesn't seem to me like compassion. It almost seems like the opposite.